John, we had a seminal moment in women's sports and sports media.
And the men played too, Andrew, with Jim Nantz saying his goodbye to college basketball.
One thing I learned through all of this is everybody has a dream and everybody has a story to tell. Just try to find that story. Be kind.
You told it better than most, let me tell you.
Can I tell you one other thing? I mean this, not to try to play off fellow friends, but to you, everybody in the college game, my CBS family, my family, all the viewers, thank you for being my friend.
And we're back. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. John, big story. Jim Nantz says goodbye on Monday. He'll be the lead voice on the Masters this weekend. And so let's get to it. Who's up? Who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
All right, Andrew, I've been waiting. I can't wait to start Who's Up this week. My Who's Up? Adley Rutschman, of course. Did you see how he started the season for the Orioles? He reached base in his first 7 plate appearances. Third player in Major League history to go 5 for 5 with multiple RBIs on opening day.
John, people want media. People want media. I got people texting me during the week. Friend of mine, Mark After, big listener, he's saying Oran's going to be insufferable.
Insufferable. By the way, the other two, Billy Herman, Hall of Famer, and somebody you might have heard of, Babe Ruth.
All right, let's go. Bound. Media. Who's up? Come on, let's go. We want media.
Right, so in more seriousness, my Who's Up for the week is Patricia Lowry. She's vice president of production at ESPN and has really overseen all of the growth that the women's tournament has seen that really just came to a head over this past weekend. Andrew, a big theme of this podcast since we started has been about the rise of women's sports as a TV property. I mean, I've talked over the past year with many bankers, with venture capitalists, and I can tell you they all view women's sports as a good bet, as something with a ton of room to still grow. People who have supported women's sports have always said, if you build it, fans will come. Well, the women's tournament, it just proved that. From start to finish, it was by far much more exciting than the men's tournament. The women's tournament highlighted stars. There was Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. There was Kim Mulkey and Dawn Staley. The storylines were great. It dominated social media. And it's not just basketball. It's not just a tournament. The NWSL is expanding into the Bay Area with a franchise that's valued at $53 million. CVC Capital Partners, it put $150 million into the WTA, the tennis group. So enough with the talk about the potential for women's sports. It's here. It's really here. And the women's tournament media rights, they come up after next season, and that's going to be another huge moment and another huge step for this part of the business.
We're going to get into that more. First topic. All right, my Who's Up is CBS's Jay Wright. Wright, who joined CBS and Turner Sports for this tournament, his first one. He was excellent, not surprising. The thing about the crew, you got Clark Kellogg in there, either Greg Gumbel or Ernie Johnson as the host. And then you have Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley, those two, obviously part of the iconic Inside the NBA. Barkley can talk about almost anything. And it's interesting at the end of the game the other day, at the end of the Final Four, he's talking about somebody behind the scenes who he met. He's going to meet up again in Florida for his final comment. It was somehow entertaining, even though it had nothing to do with really the tournament. But the thing about Wright is that he has, I'm going to show my age a little bit, that E.F. Hutton quality. When he talks, you listen. You want to know what he's going to say about in-game adjustments and what he dissects. He's just off the floor from Villanova. So he really has that, near-term experience in terms of being on a college sideline. And I thought he was excellent. And so, I kind of knew it when they made the move for CBS and Turner, bringing in Jay Wright, and it proved out a good move for Wright.
E.F. Hutton getting a shout out on the podcast. I did not have that on my bingo card this week, Andrew. I'll go straight into who's down. Twins owner Joe Polat. Diamond Sports, which owns all the Bally Sports RSNs, is late on its rights payments to the Guardians and the Twins. Well, we all knew about the Guardians. Bally executives, they've complained about that deal for a long, long time. But not paying the Twins, that was a surprise. The Twins are due to make around $40 million per year, and Diamonds, they still have 2 weeks to pay. It's a grace period without penalty. One reason for not paying the Twins, their deal is up after this season, and the team has shown no willingness whatsoever to engage with Diamond on a new one. So the big question is, what happens if Diamond doesn't pay it within the grace period? And none of the answers are good for the Twins, or the Guardians for that matter. Diamond's in bankruptcy, so nobody knows the answer to that, but MLB and the Twins firmly believe that the rights will revert back to the team, and MLB is going to come in, produce the games, and distribute them. So fans will still get to watch, but it certainly means that the Twins, a small market team in a sport that's dominated by big market teams, is going to have even less revenue coming in this year because of the missed payment.
John, my who's down, Keith Olbermann, Dave Portnoy, and Harry Douglas. Douglas is of ESPN. The reason is what we saw after the whole Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark taunting controversy that exploded on Twitter. Let's talk about Twitter for a moment. When you're on Twitter and your personality, you're on the air. There's no difference. When you say something, you're saying it publicly. You're saying it like you're on the air. Now, you look at what Olbermann said. He said he called Reese a effing idiot. Portnoy called her a piece of SH, you know the rest. And then the whole thing turned into a race issue. And so, number one, Olbermann's been outspoken forever. He's on the liberal side. Portnoy, he doesn't, there's no line for him. He'll go after people, men and women. But my problem is the language that you're using there, right? It's a 20-year-old woman that you're calling a piece of S and an effing idiot. What are we doing here? So now let's bring it to Harry Douglas. Douglas, if you don't know, he co-hosts an ESPN radio show. And Jesus Ortiz, who happens to be a good buddy of mine, former Met writer who we became good friends when we were on the Met beat together. He told him STFU because Jesus had an opinion saying that Reese was classless for how she taunted. He didn't use any bad words or anything. His opinion was fine to have. But if you don't know somebody, and even if you did know somebody, would you tell them to STFU? If Harry Douglas was on ESPN, a caller called in, would he tell him to STFU? I don't think so. And then to make the assumptions about Jesus, I'm not going to go over Jesus's full resume or anything like that, but he has a platform called Our Esquina, which means our corner of the sports world, and it's doing well, and it does documentaries, shows, and all kinds of media trying to lift up Latino voices. And I get more into his background, but it's like doth protest too much if you get into this. But the point being is when you're, again, Portnoy, he has made a living of being aggressive and strong. I actually think if he just made his points without saying, calling her a piece of SH, then I think, there are some points that there were some nuances to it. But the problem with all of this, and is the problem with social media, is that everyone just gets so loud and nobody can hear each other. And so, you have to understand that everybody doesn't hear things or see things the same way. And we don't listen to each other at all and don't hear what we're saying, there's no getting to a better spot. And it just turns into yelling and name calling. And maybe, Twitter is obviously not the place to do it. But my point overall, because it's a media podcast, is when you're on Twitter, you're on the air. So anybody who is talking on Twitter, if you would say something you would never say on the air, you probably should delete the tweet. And so that's what I would say. I'm not saying Portnoy or Olbermann especially wouldn't say those things on the air. They've used language like that before. But again, you're talking about 20-year-old women in Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. If they're 20-year-old men, it'd be the same thing. It's not one or the other. It's just that type of language. Would you say that to somebody's face? And then Douglas, same thing. Would you say that to somebody's face that you didn't even know because they had an opinion that was different than yours? So to me, those are my who's down.
that's going to lead us into the first topic, which is the NCAA women's tournament. And I'm going to take a little bit of the other side of the coin of you, and I don't disagree with your opinion, but the fact that David Portnoy and Keith Olbermann are tweeting about something that happened in the women's tournament. Identify one of their tweets from the men's final. I can't think of one. This is showing the growth of women's sports. Embrace these silly back and forths on Twitter about the game. The complaints that I saw about the officiating in the championship game, the refereeing was atrocious, and the complaints were going out on social media. That it just shows that the growth in the women's game, where it's being treated as a real proper event. And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't think that was the case, really. Even though you did have established stars like Diana Taurasi coming through and things like that. I think all of this noise it's not helping to build it up because it's already there, but it's cementing the fact that the women's tournament has a place in the American sporting lexicon right now.
Now, John, look, it's a good thing that everyone was watching and talking about the women's NCAA tournament. This is what we talked about at the top in the opening. This was a seminal moment for women's basketball. It starts with Caitlin Clark, and she got a lot of attention, which I could see annoying other teams, especially after they win, if you're LSU. The thing about Caitlin Clark, it's how she plays. That's why, to me, long-term, this could really have a huge impact on women's basketball when she goes to the WNBA, either next year or the year after, because it's how she shoots like Steph Curry. My favorite college player of all time was Chris Jackson, who later changed his name to Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. But when he was Chris Jackson at LSU, he was so awesome to watch. He'd come down and just jack threes. And it was just like, a couple of years ago, Phil Jackson kind of got, I don't know, some younger people were like, he compared Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf to Steph Curry, and actually it was a good comparison. That's how Caitlin Clark, she's different like that. I mean, she's a better passer than Chris Jackson was in college. But the way she plays is why it's so fun to watch. I mean, I think when people say she's the best player, we can get into men and women, she's the best player in college basketball. I mean, I don't know if that's technically true, right? Is she better than the men player? No, she's the most fun to watch in college basketball. That's definitive. And so that's what made this so interesting. And then going into next year, I think there's a chance they could be in prime time for the finals. But even though I don't know if the number would be better, I checked it with a couple of people, and they thought that actually the 3:30 start might have been pretty good for them because there's not much competition on Sunday afternoon. And if it was in prime time, it might have had a similar number. I mean, it wouldn't have been worse, but probably a similar number, and maybe not, another 3 to 5 million people. The refs stunk, and that kind of hurt the game as well.
Can you imagine if Iowa plays LSU next year?
Oh,
I mean, that's a rivalry that's already started. We had Joe Biden inviting the losing team for the first time ever to the White House, which Angel Reese then, correctly, in my opinion, said you can't do that.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. I mean, we don't want to get into politics on this show. That's not what we're doing here. So this is not a political statement. I actually think it's the one thing that we all can agree on. There's no way Iowa should be invited to the White House. They lost.
Well, if you're Iowa, you don't even want to go, do you?
You don't want to go. And I mean, look, I hate when everything turns into either race or gender, but when they say that to a men's team, like if they lost here, why don't you come to the White House? I don't know. It just didn't make any sense. These are competitive women who just play competitive games, and one team won, and one of the rewards for winning is you get to go to the White House. The team that loses doesn't get to go to the White House. That was a crazy comment to me.
All right, I do want to get to the men's tournament too, but first, I referenced this a little bit earlier. They have one more year with the ESPN, the NCAA women's basketball tournament, where it's part of this bigger package of NCAA title rights. So it's everything from softball to volleyball to, equestrian. And all of the NCAA championships are in this one big package of rights. Almost certainly after next season, I don't think they've actually made the final decision on it, but I don't see a path forward where they don't take the women's tournament out of that package and try to sell it on its own. I can tell you, ESPN wants to keep it, and there are plenty of other areas. Can't you see CBS and Turner deciding that would be a perfect complement to their men's tournament as well? You can see NBC that wants to get in with the NBA wanting to be a part of it. My expectation is that there's going to be a lot of noise and a lot of bidders that are going to be crawling around trying to get this. We've been talking a lot about the NBA rights deal for good reason. This is another rights deal that's going to be particularly important.
Yeah, and very interesting. And we've been talking about this since we started this podcast about a year and a half ago about women's sports and the opportunity there, right? This isn't, let's make it equal just to try to be fair. This is something that has a capitalistic upside that who knows what it's going to be. Because, I mean, quite honestly, I don't think you could watch that Final Four and not say that the women's was better than the men's. I mean, I think that's without question. Maybe if you're a UConn fan, perhaps, you'd say the men's was better because
a lot of them in Bristol.
Yeah, exactly. But
I wouldn't say that it was like better than the men's. I don't like to get into that. I will say that it had more stars than the men. It had more storylines than the men.
I wasn't saying the play was better. No, the men are better players. Like if the men played the women, the men would crush them. My point is the entertainment value was better in the women's game. The personalities were better. I mean, that's the other thing we get into. We talk about this with soccer. I get very passionate about it with soccer, but it's women's sports too. You have Ryan Rucco, Rebecca Lobo. You're at the game with your ESPN, with your pregame show, and you do it all year. When you invest in these things and treat them with respect, it brings it up a level. That's why announcers are important, because you feel the excitement when, we have it later as a call of the week when Aruco does a homage to Dick Enberg with an oh my on a deep three. That brings up the game. And when you put the resources into it, it works, and they should apply it. Volleyball is an opportunity in women's sports that's already, we're kind of seeing growth. There's a lot of opportunities to me where if you put and you treat the core audience with respect, it grows inward, outward, not the opposite. Can't try to, bring in the people who aren't that interested already. You got to focus on the people who really love it. They'll spread the word. And they've done a really good job, ESPN, with that.
All right, let's get into the men's tournament, which is almost the exact opposite of what we've been discussing with the women's tournament. I mean, I felt bad for CBS and Turner executives. They had a Final Four of UConn and, I guess UConn and Miami, and then the Cinderellas on the other end. San Diego State and Florida Athletic actually had a very entertaining Final Four game. It was an early game, doesn't get a lot of viewers. And then UConn blew out Miami, and it kind of was somewhat of an uninteresting game. And the final, of course, was never really close as well. What did you think about the presentation?
Look, I've said for a long time, Iron Eagle is going to be upgrade over Jim Nantz on play-by-play. I think you'll see more out of Bill Raftery. I think Grant Hill will be more entertaining. And so, it was a little bit weird because, Jim Nantz said goodbye this weekend, and then he's going to be all over your TV this upcoming weekend with the Masters. So that was a little strange. And, he talked about he wants to, when I broke the story last year, he told me, he wants to return home. Daddy's got to be home. So he'll do that. This has been in the works for a couple of years. He almost did it a couple of years ago. But then he wanted to be on CBS, and then he thought Houston was the perfect setting. So now he'll go home for those extra few weeks. And I don't, look, the thing about Jim Nantz on basketball, I think this is true on football. He's there. Like he's good. He's not, to me, great at it, right? There's no real calls when he does these games. Like if you look at the big game winner on Saturday, it was a little bit of a confusing call where he didn't think the scores are on the floor. And then there's no real call at the end there.
Andrew, let's listen to that call real quick.
Taken on, and it's blocked. Pulled down by Mensah. They have the one timeout. Are they going to take it or not? They don't have their scorers on the floor. It's Butler with 2 seconds. He's got to put it up. And he wins it. He wins
Nantz in with the jumper. A San Diego State miracle.
Yeah, so it was okay, but I think it's missing, like the scores thing is confusing, right? As if San Diego State didn't know who to have on the floor with the timeout to go. What they didn't know what they were doing. So that was confusing. And then he doesn't necessarily accentuate. He never really has had that basketball vocabulary that he does. He just sort of commentates on the games and give you a lot of facts. He's a little more of a host than a game caller. That's why he works so well in the Masters. Yeah, and here's the thing about it is that when Jim Nantz leaves the Masters, that's his thing. You know what I mean? That's Scully with baseball. That's Al Michaels with football. That's Marv on the NBA. You know, to me, this is something he's done for 32 years, which is a long time, and he deserves his credit. I gave him a who's up last week, but I don't know if it's ever been really that special in terms of the art of play-by-play, which you kind of associate with longevity. The other day it wasn't, he didn't want to make it about himself, but there was a lot of tributes from CBS. And then a lot of the focus from his partners, Raftery and Hill, on him. So it's a weird little dichotomy.
I want to talk a little bit about the studio show, the pregame show. I couldn't agree more on Jay Wright. I think Jay Wright was a total breakout star. I wanted to hear more of him coming in. I think one of the things about Turner and CBS is Charles Barkley is the biggest star in sports TV, probably. And Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley, they're part of probably one of the two best studio shows of all time inside the NBA. One of the reasons Inside the NBA is such a good studio show is because they know the NBA so well, and the people the players in the NBA and the coaches in the NBA and the referees in the NBA, they all know them on an NBA level. Watching them on college, they don't know the college game. And so I'm going through, the regular season, listening to ESPN's announcers and Fox Sports' studio hosts. They understand the game and they know the players in the game. And they had Clark Kellogg, Kenny Smith, Charles Barkley, and Jay Wright sitting at the desk. I only wanted to hear from one of them. And each of them had to get their little quips in, and it just didn't work for me. I hope that this experiment has run its course and they can start to bring in people that are really dedicated to the college game and want to speak of the college game and know the college game. It was really instructive to me, Andrew, when they would have a coach on and the coach would interact with Jay Wright in a way they know each other. Like that. That's what Charles and Kenny have when they're on the NBA side of things. I've grown a little tired of seeing them on the college studio set.
So I've grown the other way. Originally, I would have been with you. I think a lot of times these network pregame shows are more about having fun than getting real analysis. I think if you really want real analysis, you can go on the internet and there's a million places to read with in-depth stuff and video to watch. I think ESPN provides a lot of that as well. I think if you look at the nature of this agreement and Turner not having any college basketball during the year, they don't really have the tonnage to hire more people, right? That are really, top people, because the tournament's only for 3 weeks, right? And so they don't really have that. And this is where the CBS Turner thing, I think sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle, has been over the 11 years or so that they've been doing it in terms of who the talent should be. And Turner's going to want their people in there. CBS wants their people in there. And I actually kind of like Barkley. Now, I don't follow college hoops as much as I once do. And the people don't like Barkley in that show. Most people do like it. It's the best ever. But some people don't. I have some friends who don't because they're big NBA fans. And I don't know. Those guys aren't watching every day. I mean, they do a segment. Can you name this player? I mean, they've done that segment and they can't name NBA players. So I don't think that's what so I find it entertaining. I think it can work. Is it perfect? No, but I think it's better than a lot. I think you take Barkley whenever you can. And I think Kenny Smith, they offer stuff. They see things in the game. It's not perfect. I think Jay Wright brings that, though. Jay Wright's like you said, now you bring Jay Wright into that crew and Clark Kellogg as well. But you bring Jay Wright into that crew and, all right, let's get some real knowledge off the sideline, and that's a little bit different. But I don't know. I feel like Barkley and Kenny Smith can watch a game and see things and have opinions that I'm interested in hearing. Now, are they right? I don't know college hoops well enough these days to know if they're right or if they're always just way off on everything. But I've kind of, it's grown on me.
This is our soccer moment where you're the big soccer fan and I'm the casual fan. Like, I'm a big college basketball fan. It's way different than the NBA. So they're looking at it in a different way. Let's move on to this weekend. We have the Masters, which is going to be the first major championship where you are going to be pitting the live golfers against the PGA Tour golfers. And my expectation level on this, Andrew, is that the viewership is going to maybe not set records, but it's going to be up significantly just based on I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. If we get, the thing about sports, and, we had Nick Khan from the CEO of WWE last week, and I watched a little WrestleMania. I mean, WrestleMania is just basically a soap opera, right? That's what wrestling is. And the thing that we like about sports too is there's a soap opera aspect of it. And, live versus the PGA at the Masters. I mean, I think it makes the Masters bigger. Like, it would have been crazy to have banned the live golfers. This makes it more fun. This is the place, or one of the places, that they congregate together, where you have the best players in the world. It really becomes different and a major. And so, I think it will be fun to watch. And the Tiger Cup from a couple of years ago, I don't think you're ever going to beat that, but I think there's going to be heavy interest depending what the leaderboard looks like going into Sunday.
They asked CBS and ESPN executives if they're going to favor the PGA Tour golfers and give them more coverage than the live golfers. And really, anybody who understands TV, they're going to make decisions that are based on trying to bring in the most number of viewers. And what brings in viewers? Attention. I would be really surprised, hugely surprised, if they did anything that didn't highlight a live golfer going up against a PGA Tour golfer. I think that this is, we spoke about this in previous pods. The PGA Tour has had a really good start to the season, especially TV ratings wise, and just general interest. And I think it's all going to culminate in Augusta this coming weekend.
John, good points. Let's move on to our next topic. The WWE. We had their CEO, Nick Khan, on last week. We asked him about the sale. He had interesting comments about that. And then boom, Sunday night, story breaks. And then Monday, it's official. They got a huge deal. And I think from everyone I spoke to, a really good one for all sides. And it makes a lot of sense. What do you think?
We know how to time the big gets, Andrew, don't we?
100%.
So the deal basically is that Endeavor owns all of UFC, and they're going to take UFC, they're going to bring in WWE and create a new company that's based on what they call combat sports. They have combat sports and entertainment, because WWE obviously is scripted entertainment. And Endeavor, the big Hollywood agency, is going to own 51% of it. WWE is going to own 49% of it. It's probably going to close at the end of the year. And there are a couple things to look to. One is media rights, of course. WWE's media rights are coming up. Nick Khan last week had a lot of interesting things to say about the media rights going forward. Well, the UFC media rights are up 1 year after the WWE media rights, and how they fashion a media rights deal that potentially has both, or how they use one against the other, is going to be interesting to see. WWE in the Raw series on Monday night is the most watched non-sports series on cable television. I mean, it reliably gets a couple of million viewers every single week. It does well on Fox on Friday night in prime time as well. The UFC has been credited for helping ESPN Plus sort of gain a lot of subscribers. So the UFC fan is a rabid fan, and if there's going to be UFC matches on ESPN Plus, that's where they get a lot of subscriptions from. Similarly, Peacock and WWE as well. I think what we are going to see with the WWE, and something that Nick Khan talked about after the sale was announced, is everything outside of media rights, from marketing to ticketing to, again, they're joining Endeavor. There are going to be scripted TV series. They're going to be potentially movies. They're going to be commercial endorsements. If you think you see a lot of the WWE now, get ready to see a lot more of the WWE and their wrestlers in the next several years.
Well, look, and you have a lot of the biggest power players in media. First you have Vince McMahon and Dana White, heading up the two organizations who have built those organizations, and a little bit of Mad Men, but they are at the top of those food chains in terms of the WWE and then UFC. But then if you look at the media minds, Ari Emanuel and Mark Shapiro at WME, Nick Khan, we had tremendous reaction because you just tell he's like 3 or 4 steps ahead of a lot of people. And you put all those minds together and they're going to have more information now, because they're going to have both deals that can help them make deals. And I think the one thing, I talked to Nick Khan, as you did, after the deal was done, and he said this a number of places, they could have tried to do what they'll do with WME and Endeavor over a decade, and they might have been able to accomplish it. But now, when you look at international rights, Endeavor has people on the ground in Germany and England, and who can guide them instead of trying to build those relationships, which would have taken time. So does it grow globally? It does. I think one thing that I found, I think that's interesting to watch, and I asked him this question last week in terms of the model, right? They have a great relationship with Peacock, and WrestleMania this weekend was just, if you had Peacock, you could watch WrestleMania, which he said has grown. And like someone like me, I wouldn't have bought it, right? So I watched some of it because I have Peacock. But ESPN and UFC have been very successful with what they've done with, you have to subscribe to ESPN Plus, then you have to pay extra for the biggest events. Does that model now work? You talked to Mark Shapiro the other day, who's the president of Endeavor, and he said, we're going to use the same playbook as we did with UFC. So that is something that in these next rights, I think might be possible, where they change their strategy and say, all right, we can make more money doing this way, where you have to have this. We'll give you a lot with the subscription, but then if you want the big events, we're going to charge this much. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen. I just think that's more in play. And one other thing, all these people have relationships with all the different networks. So it's not just like there's one, but I do think this puts ESPN and Disney even more in play. I think last time they came close to getting it. I don't think there's really an issue with the content of WWE. They already have UFC. So it's not like, is this Disney enough? I don't think that's an issue. And I just think the relationships that are there, I think I could see that potentially WWE ending up, at least in some form, probably multiple partners like they have now, but in some form on ESPN.
ESPN loves the UFC. As we said before, it helped drive ESPN Plus, and it's a relationship that they really do want to continue. We always talk about who falls above that line as must-have or nice to have. I think they view UFC as pretty close to must-have because thanks to the ESPN Plus. But Andrew, we're leaving out the headline of this. Vince McMahon going on CNBC. What do you think of the mustache? Little like Clark Gable look there.
I almost tweeted out, they just made a deal. I don't know what they say, $21 billion company or something. And everyone's just going to talk about Vince McMahon's new look. That's how it works. And then, we had Nick Khan on last week, and, he seemed to have all the moves. And we mentioned, the 316 series. And then you get in the mail, and they sent us, here, let me pick it up here. For people on video, the Marchand 316 and Ourand 316. I didn't even notice the skull in the back. I don't know.
The skull in the back. That's just a Stone Cold Steve.
That's a Stone Cold thing. All right. But anyway, it was very nice. Chris Legentil. That was nice of him to send that. Marchand and Ourand 316. That could be a thing in the future. I told them, I did text the thanks. I said, listen, if you sell these, I get 90% of the proceeds. That's the split, 90-10. They start selling those.
My son has already claimed mine, so I'm going to be without.
Yeah, well, you know what? You need like one of your other kids to wear mine, and then they have to stand next to each other for all day.
All right, Stone Cold Stunner here, Andrew. We're at the end of the podcast. It's time for us to go to the call of the week.
Call of the Week.
John, Caitlin Clark did not win the national championship, but she was the biggest reason the ratings were so high. And I talked about earlier, it helps to have the broadcast level high. And this is at the beginning of the national championship. Ryan Ruocco, he helped to do that when Clark came out and had a ridiculous, 35-footer. Here's the call, little Dick Enberg here from Ruocco.
Didn't want them to think there was 10. Clark, oh my! Welcome to the national championship game.
That was a great call, Andrew. I really like the way Ryan Ruocco calls those games. He is a true believer. So I think Ruocco is somebody, as you help to build a sport or help to build an event like the NCAA Women's Tournament, you need people like Ruocco, former Big Get Rebecca Lobo in the booth, and they obviously get along well together. They have really good chemistry. I think they call a good game, and something that Rebecca Lobo said when she was on our pod, I like how she steps back and gives Ruocco a chance to make his own calls.
Well, if you think about it here in New York, Knicks and Nets next year, Mike Breen's done more finals than anybody. I think he'll be his 18th in June. He does the Knicks here in New York. Then on the Nets, this is the Yes Network. They got Ian Eagle as their number one. Ruocco's their number two. Eagle's going to do the Final Four, the national championship next year. Ruocco does the women's Final Four and is the lead announcer, does the WNBA finals as well. He's the number two on Yes. So New York State of Mind in the biggest basketball events. And then Mark Jackson, New York guy. Van Gundy, former Knick coach, I think New York guy as well. And then Lobo, Rebecca Lobo, Connecticut. And last one, you got Raftery, New Jersey guy. Grant Hill's just a superstar, Hall of Famer. No New York ties as far as I know.
All right. You know what? I got to prepare myself for the DMV and roll out all our, Scott Van Pelts and everything from that.
Orioles at the beginning. Everyone's like, let's go. Let's get to the media stuff.
Are you kidding me? Babe Ruth and Adley Rutschman, they're in the same the sentence together.
Last thing, you ever seen that tweet? It's like, I don't know who said it. I don't know who said it, but it was like about Mike Trout and Ohtani. And it was like, it's like from like 2 years ago. It's like every game I see, it's like Mike Trout hit 3 home runs and Shohei Ohtani did something that's never been done since Wolfgang, Jim Johnson did it in 1921. And the Angels lost 6-3 to the Tigers.
Well, Andrew, Grant Hill from the DMV, he's from Virginia, of course.
Oh, yeah, all right. You get one. The rest is New York, Connecticut. Anyway, see everybody, follow, and if you have a nice comment, we appreciate it.
And thank you, as always, AC Wyatt, Chris Mason, by the South Carolina grad, who is devastated by the Final Four loss to Iowa. Sorry about that, Chris.
Master the board.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.